I always said it would have been much more convenient if we paused the NBA season at least before the trade deadline so teams could still make trades. But of course, when we're talking about pandemics, you can't really choose a time for a pandemic to occur. So it's very unfortunate when this entire crisis occurred because, well, I think we could have had some more trades happening during this time. But just because the NBA is at a standstill doesn't mean that players aren't consistently in the headlines and susceptible to being traded in the future. So in this video, we're going to be discussing 8 players that are likely to be traded this NBA offseason. Cue the music. What's going on, guys? Your boy the Flight Mike back again with another video, and guys, I am missing the NBA as much as you are. So really quickly before we get to the content, if you guys happen to enjoy the stream, if you guys happen to like the content, you want to help the channel grow, just drop a like, subscribe, and turn notifications on. And of course, your boy likes to stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 9 p.m. Pacific time. A link to my Twitch is in the description down below. The very first player I want to be discussing here is Devin Booker. Now, the reason why Devin Booker could potentially be traded is more because of a manifest destiny-like scenario happening in Minnesota. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with this Slam magazine cover that features Devin Booker, D'Angelo Russell, and Karl Anthony Towns. The trio is known to have a phenomenal rapport with one another, and the Timberwolves do have some assets that they could dangle in front of the Phoenix Suns to potentially acquire Devin Booker. But that's the thing. Devin Booker is still under contract for a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, his 5-year contract extension began kicking in this season. So, for all you know, even if Devin Booker is panting and stamping his feet demanding a trade to Minnesota, the Phoenix Suns could theoretically keep him on the roster for the next 5 years. Furthermore, the Phoenix Suns seem to be trending in the right direction, building a nice young nucleus around Devin Booker that features former #1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton. And to be honest, the Suns are also making some progress this season, but that's not to say that D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns aren't going to do their best to absolutely sway Devin Booker to come to Minnesota. Now, while Devin Booker might be more of a long shot as a trade candidate, then CP3 is a much more realistic and significantly more likely scenario. For those of you guys not following Chris Paul's story for the past year, last year he was on the Houston Rockets. Before the Houston Rockets decided that the CP3 James Harden experiment was over, they decided to ship Chris Paul to the OKC Thunder, received Russell Westbrook in return, and part with a ton of first-round picks to make the OKC Thunder hold on to the contract of Chris Paul. Now, originally, a lot of people thought that Sam Presti was going to buy out Chris Paul, but that's not what ended up happening, is it? As a matter of fact, Sam Presti said that there's no way that he is going to give up Chris Paul for free. He views him as a significant asset, and Chris Paul spent the entire year in Oklahoma City next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Steven Adams, putting up some tremendous statistics for his age. As he put up 17.7 points to go with 7 assists and 5 rebounds, his player efficiency rating was also a 21.7, and he shot 49% from the field. The rumors surrounding Chris Paul as of now is that the New York Knicks are very much so interested in trading him in order to boost the culture of that entire franchise. It's no secret that the New York Knicks have been struggling since the days of Patrick Ewing. They recently parted with Kristaps Porzingis, probably the best draft pick they've ever had since Patrick Ewing. Well, that's kind of unfair. Allen Houston was decent, John Starks was good. You know, we can't really hate on them for that, but you get what I'm saying. And honestly, I love the idea of a Chris Paul trade to the New York Knicks. I actually think Chris Paul on the Knicks could make them a dark horse candidate to make it to the playoffs, assuming all the pieces fit in. Imagine a starting 5 of Mitchell Robinson, Julius Randle, Mo Harkless, and RJ Barrett. I also can't help but feel like Chris Paul would be phenomenal for RJ Barrett's development moving forward. So I like the idea of CP3 on the Knicks, and I do think that's probably the most likely place that he'll go to. Up next, we have Chris Paul's former teammate Blake Griffin, who I just can't help but feel like it's a matter of time. The writing's on the wall before the Detroit Pistons decide to part with Blake Griffin as well. After acquiring Blake Griffin originally to form some sort of tandem between him and Andre Drummond, of a Twin Towers-like concept, a concept that hasn't been proven to work since the early 2000s, maybe to the mid-90s as well, Detroit Pistons decided to pull the plug on the experiment after shipping Andre Drummond for peanuts to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think the saddest part of all of this is the fact that Blake Griffin had a career year last year, shooting 24.5 points per game, grabbing 7.4 rebounds per game, and also dishing 5 assists per game. He had an amazing player efficiency rating as well of 21.0. He had positive box plus minus scores for both offense and defense, and a value over replacement player of 4.7. I can't help but feel like Blake has way more left in the tank, but whether he gets traded or not depends on how he decides to play his contract. Because next year, Blake Griffin is going to be on a contract year. If he puts out another down season, you could assume that he's going to accept the option on his final year of his contract. If he decides to accept the player option, the contract's going to run from the 21 to 22 season, and given how Blake Griffin's been playing recently, you best believe he's going to accept the living hell out of that contract. Unless if he's content with the amount of money that he's earned throughout his career, then he might reject it in order to try to ring chase in the latter part of his NBA career. The only team that I could potentially see trying to acquire Blake Griffin is a team that is willing to allow Detroit to dump the salary of Blake Griffin and also take on significant assets as well. And I don't understand why the Pistons would do that, because it's not like Blake Griffin is holding them back from anything. Think about it. You trade Blake Griffin. What happens next? What are you going to do now that you have a bunch of cap space? Are you going to try to sign Anthony Davis this offseason? No one's going to sign with you. You're rebuilding and have been rebuilding for the past 10 years. But hey, just because it doesn't make logical sense doesn't mean the Detroit Pistons won't do it. We saw them part with Andre Drummond for nothing, and well, let's just buckle down to see what they do with Blake Griffin. The next person that I want to include on this list is Al Horford. Not Ben Simmons, not Joel Embiid, but Al Horford. And here is why. For one, he doesn't fit into the Philadelphia 76ers offense whatsoever. His fit is extremely awkward, and he has been mitigating the role of Joel Embiid on the offensive side of the ball. And that's not to mention that Al Horford took a huge step back defensively. Originally, Al Horford was looked at as the replacement for Jimmy Butler to bring in defensive intensity to the Philadelphia 76ers, but he has not been able to do that. But he is so absolutely atrocious on the offensive side of the ball that he needs to go if the Sixers want any chance of a successful rebuild around Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. To give you an idea of how terrible he's been, last year, Al Horford, and he chose a phenomenal year to do this, shot 54% from the field and also shot 36% from three. The year before, he shot 43% from three and 49% from the field. While doing this, he also averaged 13.6 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks. And to his credit, this year, he has been able to manage the same amount of about the same amount of points with 12 points per game. He's also been able to grab 6.9 rebounds. The issue is this year he's shooting 44% from the field and 34% from three. His player efficiency rating dipped tremendously from a 20.2 with the Boston Celtics to a 15.6 with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, defensively, he did regress slightly. His box plus minus on the defensive side of the ball was a 1.9 last year. This year, it's a 1.1. But what's sad is his offensive box plus minus last year was a 3.3. This year, it's a 1.1. Now look, I can't think of a single team that would potentially think, oh, hey, let's trade for the overpaid 33-year-old center and then pay his contract for the next 4 years. If the 76ers want to part with Al Horford, they need to find a team that is literally a center away from being a playoff contender, or a team that could potentially take on the contract of Al Horford just so they could see what they have in him and just so they could hold on to him for the time being, and of course, take on some assets as well. I can't help but feel like he's a phenomenal fit for the Milwaukee Bucks, but I don't see the Milwaukee Bucks making any drastic changes and adding any more cap to the amount of cap that they've already spent. Which brings me to our next player. Speaking of Milwaukee, let's talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo, because if I don't mention his name in this list, then, well, this list should become invalidated automatically, because look, this is a speculative video. We're talking about players that could be traded, and the most likely players that could be traded. Giannis is at the top of that list. And it really depends on how the rest of the NBA season goes, if the NBA season continues, and how Giannis feels over the summertime. If the season resumes and the Milwaukee Bucks make a great run at the NBA Finals and Giannis is satisfied, then yeah, he probably won't get traded. But if that doesn't happen, then yes, expect Giannis Antetokounmpo to demand a trade to, I don't know what team he'd want to go to. A lot of people are speculating the Warriors. I don't really know where Giannis's head is at, so I don't know where he would want to go if it's not Milwaukee. All I do know is if he doesn't win a championship and he's not appeased, if he feels like he's hit a wall with the Milwaukee Bucks, which is a pretty big if, by the way, because the Bucks have done everything they could to improve their roster just for Giannis year after year, then yes, expect him to demand a trade to a different team. A lot of people are speculating the Warriors. If you think it's a different team, let me know in the comment section down below, because the Milwaukee Bucks aren't going to be willing to lose Giannis for absolutely nothing when he becomes a free agent next year. So I'm going to group the next trade candidates together because I feel like they're a pairing, and that's Bradley Beal and John Wall. And the reason I'm pairing them together is I feel like in order to get Bradley Beal, you're going to have to take on the contract of John Wall. That's the way that I expect the Wizards to play this situation out. They're not going to want to pay a John Wall that just tore his Achilles the amount of money John Wall is due. If you think Chris Paul's contract is bad or Blake Griffin's contract is bad, John Wall just signed a $170 million contract extension that kicked in this year, and he is stuck with the Wizards for the next 4 years. Man, oh man, I've never seen a player pull off a more slick finesse in my entire life. This is pretty much like signing Devin Booker, and Devin Booker doesn't play for you. That's pretty much the equivalent to it, because I don't expect John Wall to be nearly as effective as he once was once he does take the court once again. Look, man, I don't mean to be bagging on the guy. I'm a diehard fan of John Wall's. I've been a huge fan of his since he was in high school after watching that viral hoop mixtape. I have his rookie jersey in my closet. It's just I don't trust a player whose game revolves around athleticism, who is coming back off of an injury that's notorious for sapping players of their athleticism. It's nothing personal against John, and I hope he proves me wrong. But the Washington Wizards have a unique opportunity to hit the reset button if they pair Bradley Beal and John Wall together and ship them both out. In return for, I don't expect a lot of assets, because if you do take on the contract of John Wall, you're doing the Wizards a huge solid. But let's imagine that they don't try to trade John Wall. Then I believe that no matter what, they are doing themselves a disservice if they don't trade Bradley Beal. There's just way too much value there, and it's not going to bring you a championship if he stays on the Wizards. You need to get rid of him and get something in return and build towards the future. Now that you got him under contract, and now that you have Bradley Beal at probably his peak value. The final player I'm going to include here is DeMar DeRozan, and it's mainly because DeRozan hasn't exactly been flourishing with the San Antonio Spurs. Greg Popovich tried to get something in return for Kawhi Leonard, but he wasn't able to turn DeRozan into the player he was hoping he would be. He didn't really fit in with LaMarcus Aldridge and the motion offense, which is fine. If you ask me, the team that I think DeRozan might try to go back to is the Toronto Raptors. His best friend Kyle Lowry is there. It would make for a cute little story, but I don't exactly know. I'm going to let you guys decide that in the comment section down below. And guys, those are the players that I believe are going to be traded in the offseason. If you think there's a player that I egregiously omitted out of this list, please let me know in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy, the Flight Mike, and I'll catch you guys in our next upload.